My new wife was so jealous of my daughter, she tried to have her committed. When I married Rebecca 5 years ago, I honestly thought I was the luckiest man alive. I've been a single dad for 3 long years after losing my wife, Mary, in a car wreck. To say those years were hard would be an understatement. They were brutal. My daughter, Mia, who was 10 when her mom died, just completely shut down. It was like a light went out inside her, and I had no idea how to switch it back on. My son, Jake, was only 5, a little ball of energy who didn't fully grasp the permanence of what had happened. He just knew mommy was gone and daddy was sad all the time. I was drowning, trying to be two parents while barely functioning as one, navigating a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. So, when Rebecca came into our lives, it felt like a miracle. She had this big, easy smile, a calm, soothing voice, and a well of patience that seemed bottomless. She was everything our chaotic, broken little family needed. She started baking again in our dusty and used kitchen, filling the house with the smell of cookies and apple pie. She put up new curtains and added little decorative touches that slowly turned our sad, gray house back into a warm, inviting home. The kids, for their part, seemed to like her. Jake, being so young, was won over pretty easily with board games and trips to the park. Mia, who was 12 by then, was more reserved, more cautious. It took her longer to come around, but she was always polite, always made an effort. I was so incredibly proud of them, of us. I thought we were building something new and beautiful from the ashes of our tragedy. But then, things started to shift. It happened so slowly, so subtly, that I didn't even notice at first. The changes were like a tide coming in, imperceptible until you realize your ankles are wet. It would be little things, comments made at the dinner table, always with that same helpful smile. "Maybe skip the potatoes tonight, sweetie," Rebecca would say to Mia. "You've been saying you want to fit into that dress for the dance recital." She'd say it in a tone that sounded like she was on Mia's team, just offering friendly advice. Mia would clam up, her shoulders tensing as she pushed the potatoes to the side of her plate. I'd shoot her a confused look, my expression silently asking, "What's the big deal? Is she overreacting?" I never said anything to Rebecca. I rationalized it as normal parenting, maybe a bit of a clumsy attempt to connect with a teenage girl about body image. I told myself I was just out of my depth. When Mia brought home a certificate for academic excellence, a big achievement in her advanced math class, Rebecca's congratulations were lukewarm at best. "Oh, that's nice, honey," she said, barely glancing up from her phone. But that very same week, Jake came home with a sticker for being the best helper in his kindergarten class, and Rebecca baked an entire 3-layer cake to celebrate. She made a huge deal out of it, taking pictures and calling her own mom to brag. Mia just rolled her eyes and retreated to her room. At the time, I thought she was being petty, a typical teenager jealous of her younger brother getting attention. I didn't see the pattern yet. I was so desperate for this new family to work that I was blind to the cracks forming right in front of me. A few months into our marriage, Rebecca decided to deep clean Mia's room while she was at a friend's house for the weekend. When Mia came back, she discovered that several boxes of her mom's old things were gone. Old notes Mary had written her, scars that still smelled faintly of her perfume, birthday cards from years past. Rebecca claimed they were moldy and smelled bad, that she was just trying to help Mia have a fresh start. Mia was eerily quiet when she saw the room. I asked her if she was okay, and she just nodded, her face a blank mask. But later that night, I saw her through the window, sitting on the back porch in the dark, hugging an old picture frame of her and Mary that Rebecca must have missed. Her small shoulders were shaking with silent sobs. I didn't go out there. In my cowardice and confusion, I told myself she just needed some space. I didn't want the confrontation. I didn't want to upset the fragile peace of our new home. Things only got worse from there. Rebecca started policing Mia's phone with an iron fist. She demanded to check her messages. She deleted apps she didn't approve of, and she framed it all as being for Mia's own safety. Mia argued that it wasn't fair, that Jake had free reign on his tablet, but Rebecca would just calmly reply, "Boys are different, Mia. Their world is simpler." It was maddeningly effective because it sounded just plausible enough. Every single time I tried to get a moment alone with Mia, to really talk to her about how she was feeling, Rebecca wouldn't materialize out of nowhere. She'd interrupt with a question about dinner, or change the subject to something about Jake, or start a whole new conversation that would pull my attention away. It was so seamless, so expertly done, that I didn't even catch on to the tactic in real time. I just felt increasingly disconnected from my own daughter. Slowly, predictably, Mia began to withdraw even further. She became quieter, her grades started to slip, and her friends stopped coming over to the house. When I asked her about it, she would just shrug and say she was tired. Rebecca, of course, had her own narrative. She told me Mia was acting out, that she had a bad attitude, and was being defiant. She even took it a step further, confiding in a few of the other school moms that she was worried Mia was experimenting with substances. I heard that rumor secondhand from my sister, and while I didn't truly believe it, I also didn't confront Rebecca about it. I was so exhausted. I was working a demanding full-time job, trying to be a good husband, trying to hold this new family together. The path of least resistance was to believe that this was all just a difficult adjustment period, that Mia was just having a hard time accepting a new mom. I convinced myself it would all blow over. We tried therapy, or at least I thought we did. The moment we sat down in the therapist's office, Rebecca turned on the waterworks. She delivered a heart-wrenching performance about how hard she was trying to connect with Mia, how she loved her like her own, but Mia just shut her out at every turn. Mia, for her part, just sat there, looking down at her lap, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. She'd just shrug or give one-word answers. To the therapist, it must have looked exactly like Rebecca described. Afterward, in the car, Rebecca squeezed my hand and said with a sigh, "You saw how she treats me. What more can I possibly do?" And I, like a fool, didn't have an answer. Then came the night that everything finally snapped into focus. Mia had a full-blown panic attack. I found her on her bedroom floor, gasping for air, her face pale and clammy, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Rebecca rushed in right behind me, her face a mask of practiced concern. "We need to get her evaluated," she said, her voice firm and decisive. "She's not well." I held Mia while she sobbed, while she begged me not to send her away, her fingers digging into my arms. "She's manipulating you," Rebecca whispered in my ear. "She needs professional help." That's when she showed me the screenshots. Texts she claimed she'd found on Mia's phone, conversations with a friend about getting pills, about wanting to disappear. My stomach twisted into a knot of pure dread. I didn't want to believe it, but there it was in black and white. She had the evidence, and she was so calm, so rational, while my daughter screamed and shook and cried that the screenshots were fake, that she'd never written those things. In that moment of chaos and fear, I made the worst decision of my life. I agreed to let the hospital evaluate her. I told myself it was the right thing to do, the responsible thing. I was just trying to protect her. The house felt cavernous after she was gone. I couldn't sleep. I just kept replaying the events of the night of the past few years, over and over in my head. I kept thinking about how quickly everything had escalated, about how tired Mia looked all the time, how thin she'd gotten, how deep the sadness in her eyes was. It felt like I was waking up from a long, confusing dream. The next evening, I went to grab Rebecca's tablet to look up a recipe for dinner. Her journal app was open on the screen. I don't know why I did it. Maybe some subconscious part of me was already searching for answers, but I opened it, and then my world fell apart. She had written everything down. Every single calculated move, every lie, every little act of psychological warfare. She wrote about her plan to make Mia look unstable, about deliberately deleting positive messages from Mia's friends to isolate her, about how removing the girl would finally fix our family and allow us to be happy. She even detailed how she'd used an app to fake the screenshots and how she'd made calls to other parents to plant seeds of doubt about Mia's character. It was all there, laid out in cold, meticulous, chilling detail. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I wanted to be sick. When I confronted her, she denied it first, of course. She tried to gaslight me, to say I was misinterpreting her words. But when I held up the tablet, when she saw the look on my face, she froze. Then, like flipping a switch, the tears started flowing. "I was just so tired of living in Mary's shadow," she sobbed. "Mia never saw me as a mother. She looked at me like I was an intruder. I couldn't stand being in second place in my own home." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. All the rage had been replaced by a cold, dead calm. I just stared at her and asked, "How could you do that to a child? To my child?" She didn't have an answer. She just kept crying. There was nothing else to say. "Pack your things," I said, my voice flat. "Get out of my house." She stopped crying instantly. A bitter, ugly laugh escaped her lips. "You can't just throw me out," she sneered, her whole demeanor changing. "We're married. This is my home, too. Besides," she added, her eyes narrowing, "who do you think everyone will believe? The grieving widow who's clearly having a mental breakdown, or the caring, devoted stepmother who's been holding this broken family together for years?" That's when the sheer terror hit me. I had left Mia at that hospital. I ran out of the room, up the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs, terrified of what I might find or not find. I called the hospital on the way, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. The nurse who answered was calm and professional. She confirmed Mia was there, that she was safe, and that the initial intake had been completed. They were planning to hold her for a 72-hour observation period. I told her there had been a terrible mistake, that I was coming to get her immediately. The nurse informed me that since I had signed a consent form, I would need to speak with the attending physician to arrange for her discharge against medical advice. It was a bureaucratic nightmare, but it was a solvable one. Mia was safe. That was all that mattered. I got to the hospital, and after a tense and complicated conversation with a doctor who clearly thought I was an unstable parent, I was finally able to sign the paperwork to get Mia released. When she saw me, her eyes were red-rimmed and full of a weary resignation that broke my heart. She didn't even look surprised, just tired. She quietly followed me out to the car, and on the drive, I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," felt so laughably inadequate. I drove straight to my sister Barbara's house. It was late by the time we showed up on her doorstep. She took one look at my face, at Mia's pale, drawn expression, and ushered us inside without a single question. Once Mia was settled in the guest room, I pulled out my phone and showed Barbara the screenshots I'd taken of Rebecca's journal entries. Barbara read through them, her expression growing darker and more furious with each page. "Holy hell," she whispered, looking up at me. I always thought something was off about her, but this is psychotic. I told her I needed a safe place for Mia and Jake to stay while I figure out what to do. My own house felt contaminated, unsafe. Barbara immediately offered up her home. "Stay as long as you need," she said, her voice fierce with loyalty. "All of you." The next morning was a frantic blur of phone calls. First, I called Jake's school and told him he wouldn't be in, inventing a vague family emergency. Then I called my boss and did the same. Finally, I called a lawyer a friend had used for his divorce. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Quinn, agreed to see me immediately after I gave her the brief, horrifying summary of the situation. I left Mia sleeping at Barbara's and drove to Quinn's office. She reviewed the journal printouts, her face unreadable, and listened to my whole sordid story without interruption. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. "This is extremely concerning behavior," she said, looking at me seriously. "What Rebecca has done constitutes severe emotional abuse of a minor. We need to act, and we need to act quickly to protect your children legally." Quinn explained the immediate steps. We needed to file for an emergency custody order and a restraining order. She strongly advised me against returning to my house alone. People who engage in this level of manipulation and deception can become unpredictable, even dangerous, when they're exposed, she warned. "If you need to get your belongings, take a police officer with you." I asked her about the psychiatric evaluation. She advised me to get Mia in to see an independent child psychologist of our choosing immediately. We need a professional evaluation from someone who isn't being fed a false narrative by Rebecca. Their assessment will be crucial in countering any claims Rebecca might make about Mia's mental state. On my way back to Barbara's, my phone started exploding with texts and calls from Rebecca. I ignored them, but the notifications kept popping up on my screen. "Where are you? You can't just take my children. You're making a huge mistake. We could talk about this. Those journal entries aren't what you think. I can explain everything if you just come home." The sheer audacity was staggering. When I got back, I found Mia awake, sitting in the guest room, looking out the window. She looked so small and lost. I sat down on the bed next to her. "Are we really not going back?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "No, sweetheart, we're not," I said gently. "I found out some things about Rebecca. Things that show she hasn't been honest with us." Mia didn't look surprised at all. "She hates me, Dad," she said, stating it as a simple, undeniable fact. "She's always hated me." That one sentence, so devoid of drama, so full of quiet certainty, shattered what was left of my heart. I pulled her into a hug, and the apologies just poured out of me. I was sorry for not seeing it, for not listening, for not protecting her, for ever bringing Rebecca into our lives. Mia cried against my shoulder, not the panic sobs of the other night, but deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from years of pain she'd held back. When she finally calmed down, she started telling me things. All the little cuts and cruelties that had happened when I wasn't around. The constant comments about her weight, about how certain clothes made her look chubby. The time Rebecca accidentally threw away a new pair of jeans Mia loved because she claimed they didn't fit right. The way she would tell Mia that her dancing wasn't as special as she thought, that she was good for a hobby, but not great. The constant restrictions on her phone and internet, all while telling me that Mia was the one isolating herself. "She told me you and Jake were happier when I wasn't around," Mia whispered, her voice cracking. "She said I reminded you too much of Mom, and it made you sad. So I should try to stay in my room more often." Every word was like a fresh stab of a knife. How had I been so blind? How had I let this woman poison my daughter's life for so long? I had to go get Jake later that day. That conversation was even harder in its own way. He was only 8. He didn't understand. He just kept asking when we were going home and why Rebecca wasn't with us. I tried to explain in the simplest terms I could that Rebecca had done some very unkind things and that we needed to have some time away from her. He seemed to accept it for the moment, but his confused, hurt little face was another testament to the damage she had caused. That afternoon, true to her nature, Rebecca showed up at Barbara's house. She started by ringing the doorbell, then started pounding on the door, demanding to see her children. Barbara, a rock, called the police while I took Mia and Jake into the back bedroom, trying to shield them from the scene. By the time 2 officers arrived, Rebecca had composed herself completely. She was standing on the lawn, calmly explaining to them that her unstable husband had inexplicably taken the children, and she was just worried sick about their well-being. The officers asked to speak with me. I showed them the journal printouts and gave them the short version of the story. They seemed skeptical at first. Rebecca presented so well, so rational, so normal, but they agreed to file a report documenting the incident. They couldn't force her to leave since she was on a public sidewalk, but they did advise her that causing a disturbance could lead to her arrest. She eventually left, but not before she looked directly at the window of the room we were in and mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. The sight sent a genuine chill down my spine. The next morning, Barbara insisted on going with me back to my house to get some essential items. I half expected Rebecca to be there, waiting for a confrontation, but the house was empty. It felt different, colder, stripped of the false warmth she had injected into it. I moved through the rooms like a zombie, quickly packing clothes, school supplies, medications, and any treasure possessions I could think of, including the few remaining photos of Mary the first could find. In Mia's room, I saw the empty spaces on her shelves where she used to keep mementos of her mother. Then I saw something under her bed. I reached down and pulled out a pile of torn photos and a broken picture frame. Rebecca hadn't just thrown her things away. She had deliberately, methodically destroyed them. The malice was so profound it made me physically sick. That afternoon, I checked our joint bank account. It was a smart call from Quinn. Rebecca had transferred nearly $15,000, almost every liquid dollar we had, to her personal account that morning. When I called the bank, they confirmed that as a joint account holder, she had every legal right to do so. It was another painful lesson in just how vulnerable I had made my family. I sent Rebecca a single text. "Where is the money?" Her response was instantaneous and chilling. "Consider it payment for babysitting your troubled kids for the past 5 years. You'll need it for Mia's therapy bills anyway." I forwarded it directly to Quinn. 3 days later, we had our emergency custody hearing. It was surreal. Rebecca sat there, dressed in a conservative gray suit, her expression a perfect portrait of confusion and concern. Her attorney painted her as a loving, devoted stepmother, completely blindsided by her husband's sudden and erratic behavior. They suggested I was having a delayed grief reaction to my first wife's death and had become paranoid. And the journal? They claimed it was a creative writing exercise Rebecca had done as part of her own grief counseling, a way to work through her anxieties about blending a family by imagining worst-case scenarios. It was so slick, so convincing, that for a terrifying moment, I even started to question myself. Was I overreacting? Then, the judge asked to speak with Mia privately in his chambers. I don't know what she said in there. She was only gone for 10 minutes. But when they returned, the judge's entire demeanor toward Rebecca had changed. It had gone from patient neutrality to a barely concealed frostiness. He granted me temporary full custody of both children and issued a temporary restraining order, ordering Rebecca to stay away from us, the kids' schools, and Barbara's house. The court takes allegations of psychological abuse very seriously, the judge stated, looking directly at Rebecca. Until a full investigation can be conducted, the priority must be the children's safety and well-being. Rebecca's face remained a blank mask. No tears, no outrage, nothing. That utter lack of emotion was somehow more frightening than any outburst would have been. The next few weeks were a strange combination of relief and constant, gnawing anxiety. We stayed with Barbara while I frantically searched for a new place to live. I couldn't imagine ever going back to that house, a place so filled with deception. Besides, I learned through Quinn that Rebecca was still living there, refusing to leave until a court ordered the division of assets. Mia started seeing a new therapist, a wonderful woman named Dr. Morgan, who specialized in childhood trauma. After just 2 sessions, Dr. Morgan asked to speak with me alone. Mia has described a textbook case of parental alienation and psychological gaslighting. She explained in a calm, clinical tone that was somehow reassuring. Rebecca systematically undermined Mia's self-worth, isolated her from her support systems, and attempted to destroy her relationship with you. The fact that she targeted mementos of Mia's mother is particularly insidious. She was, quite literally, trying to erase Mia's connection to her own past. Dr. Morgan's words validated everything, but they also highlighted the depth of the damage. Jake was struggling in his own way, too. Unlike Mia, Jake had been Rebecca's golden child, the one she used to demonstrate what a wonderful, loving mother she could be. He was confused and hurt by her sudden absence, and sometimes he would ask when he could see her again. This, predictably, created a new source of tension between the siblings. Mia couldn't understand why Jake would want to see the person who had hurt her so badly. Jake couldn't fully grasp what Rebecca had done. They argued constantly, with Jake accusing Mia of making things up and Mia calling Jake Rebecca's little puppet. It was heartbreaking, another fire I had to constantly put out. Meanwhile, the legal battle raged on. Rebecca countersued for custody, her court filings a work of pure fiction. She claimed I was alienating the children from her and that Mia had severe, pre-existing mental health issues that I was neglecting. Her attorney submitted so-called evidence. Old social media posts where Mia had expressed typical teenage angst, school records showing her declining grades, which, ironically, had begun right after Rebecca moved in, and sworn statement from Rebecca's friends who claimed to have witnessed Mia being disrespectful and troubled. The most disgusting submission was a psychological analysis from a therapist who had never even met Mia, but who, based solely on Rebecca's tearful descriptions, suggested Mia might have borderline personality disorder. Quinn managed to get it thrown out as hearsay, but the fact that she'd gone that far was terrifying. Throughout all this, Rebecca maintained a flawless public image. She posted frequently on social media about how much she missed her kids and was praying for healing for our broken family. She joined online support groups for alienated parents and shared articles about false accusations and high-conflict divorces. And some people bought it. I received messages from mutual friends, people I had known for years, asking me why I was being so harsh, suggesting we try marriage counseling, insisting that Rebecca deserved a chance to explain herself. I cut every single one of those people out of my life without a second thought. A month after we left, we finally moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was ours, a clean slate where Rebecca had never set foot. The kids decorated their own rooms. Mia covered her walls with dance posters, and Jake created a space theme with glow-in-the-dark stars on a ceiling. I hung photos of Mary in the living room, a defiant act of reclaiming our history. When I gave Mia a newly framed photo of her and her mom, she cried, but this time they were tears of gratitude. The new apartment became our sanctuary, but Rebecca's campaign of harassment only escalated. She somehow got my new work email and sent messages to my colleagues, expressing her deep concern for my mental state. She called my parents and told them I was refusing to let them see their grandchildren, a complete lie. The worst was when she filed an anonymous report with Child Protective Services, claiming the children were living in unsafe, neglectful conditions. The CPS visit was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. But in the end, it was helpful to our case. The social worker who came to our apartment was thorough and professional. She interviewed me and both children separately, inspected our home, and reviewed the court documents I provided. Her final report was a godsend. It concluded that there were zero safety concerns and noted that both children appear to be well cared for and emotionally supported in their father's care. In a twisted way, every desperate, malicious act from Rebecca just made our case stronger. It demonstrated the exact pattern of manipulation and vindictiveness that her own journal had described. 2 months after we left, we had the full custody hearing. By then, the mountain of evidence against her was overwhelming. We had the journal, we had statement from Mia's and Jake's therapists, we had a statement from Jake's teacher about Rebecca's dismissive behavior, we had the favorable CPS report, and we had a documented trail of her harassment. The judge reviewed everything, and it didn't take long. He awarded me permanent, full legal and physical custody of both children. Rebecca was granted supervised visitation with Jake only, and even that was contingent on her completing a full psychological evaluation and a series of parenting classes. Mia, at 14, was deemed old enough to decide for herself, and she wanted zero contact. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca's mask of composure finally cracked. She brushed past me, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "You think you've won, but you haven't. Those kids will never forget me. Jake loves me more than he loves you. And Mia, she'll never trust anyone again because of what you let happen to her. That's my real legacy in your precious family." A bailiff stepped in before I could respond, but her words stuck in me like thorns. Her words haunted me. Was she right? Had the damage she'd inflicted permanently changed my children? That night, I sat alone in our new, sterile living room, staring at a photo of Mary, and just felt the full weight of my failure. "I'm so sorry," I whispered to the picture. "I let her hurt our babies. I didn't protect them." The next morning, Mia found me asleep on the couch. She sat down beside me. "I heard what she said to you at court yesterday," she said quietly. "About me and Jake." I sighed, feeling another wave of guilt. "You shouldn't have had to hear that." "No, but I did," she insisted. "And she's wrong. Jake doesn't love her more than you. He's just confused. And me." She took a deep breath. "I do have trust issues now, but that's not your fault. It's hers. You believed me when it mattered most." She reached across the table and took my hand. "We're going to be okay, Dad." In that moment, her strength was a mirror of her mother's. A few days later, Rebecca violated the restraining order by sending a package to our apartment. Inside was a framed photo of her and Jake from Happier Time, and a note. "Some bonds can't be broken." I reported it to the police and Quinn. I also installed a doorbell camera and changed the locks again. The divorce dragged on. Rebecca refused to move out of our old house, and Quinn advised that forcing the sale would only provoke her. We focused on the kids. For months after we left, Jake's supervised visitations began. The first visit was tense. Jake came out looking confused. He told me later that Rebecca had spent a whole hour asking him questions about her new apartment, my work schedule, and if Mia was dating anyone. The supervisor had to intervene multiple times. After the third visit followed the same pattern, Jake's therapist suggested pausing them. Jake readily agreed. Admitting the visits made him feel squirmy inside. 6 months into our new life, things started to feel calmer. We settled into a routine. Then, on the day before Mia's 15th birthday, she asked if we could visit Mary's grave. We hadn't been since before Rebecca. At the cemetery, I gave her space. I watched her talk softly to the headstone. When she motioned for me to join her, we stood together, my arm around her shoulders. "I told Mom everything," she said. "I told her I miss her, but that I'm doing better now." That evening, at her small birthday party, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Happy birthday to my favorite stepdaughter. I'm closer than you think." I didn't tell Mia. I wouldn't let Rebecca ruin her day. But that night, I sat awake by the front door, my heart pounding at every sound. The next morning, I changed the locks again. 2 days later, Quinn called. Rebecca had finally completed her court-ordered psychological evaluation. The diagnosis: narcissistic personality disorder with elements of borderline personality disorder. The evaluator noted her inability to empathize, her pattern of manipulation, and recommended extensive therapy before any unsupervised contact with children. It was a validation, but a terrifying one. What would a person with that diagnosis do when they felt cornered? I didn't have to wait long to find out. That weekend, at Jake's Little League game, I saw her. She was standing at the far end of the field, partially hidden behind a tree, just watching. Our eyes met for a split second across the field, and she gave me a small, cold, calculating smile before melting back into the trees. By the time the police officer I called arrived, she was gone. Another documented violation, but it was just my word against hers. The next morning, I returned from dropping the kids at school to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My blood ran cold. I called 911 before going inside. The police cleared the apartment. No one was there. Nothing of value was taken. But on my bedroom wall, where a photo of Mary had hung, there was now a photo of Rebecca with the kids. On the back, she had written, "Families are forever. I'll always be their mother, too." That was the last straw. We couldn't stay there. I set the kids down and told them we had to move again. Jay cried. Mia just got this look of weary resignation on her face that broke my heart. "I'm sorry," I told them, my voice thick. "But we need to be somewhere she can't find us." I found a new apartment in a high-security building 30 minutes away. While we were packing, Quinn called. We had enough restraining order violations to request Rebecca's arrest. I hesitated, fearing it would make her more desperate, but I agreed. She needed to face real consequences. 2 days later, the police called. They'd gone to serve the warrant, but Rebecca was gone. Her car was missing. Mail was piling up. She had disappeared. The uncertainty was terrifying. We moved into the new, secure apartment, telling almost no one our address. For a week, I barely slept, jumping at every noise. Then, I got a call from a police department in a small town 3 hours away. They had detained Rebecca. She had caused a drunken disturbance at a hotel, making specific threats against me and the family. She had an outstanding warrant. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by dread. She was in custody, but she was still fighting. After a hearing where the judge reviewed her pattern of behavior and the new threats, her bail was denied. She was going to stay in jail. A few weeks later, a letter arrived, forwarded from Quinn's office. It was from Rebecca, on prison stationery. It wasn't an apology. It was a promise. They can't keep me in here forever. And when I get out, I'll find you. You can change your address, your phone numbers, even your names, but I'll always find my way back to my family. It confirmed my worst fears. This would never end. I met with the police officer handling our case. Off the record, she told me, if I were you, I'd be looking at relocating. A new city. That night, I discussed it with Mia. What if we just left, she suggested, her voice small. Move somewhere she couldn't find us. The fact that my 15-year-old daughter had reached the same conclusion was all the confirmation I needed. The very next morning, my fragile sense of security was shattered. I was about to leave for Rebecca's hearing when I got a call from Jake's school. "Mr. Anderson," the secretary said, her voice strained. "A woman tried to sign Jake out of school an hour ago. She claimed to be his aunt." My heart stopped. What did she look like? I asked, already knowing the answer. The description matched Rebecca's perfectly. How was she out of jail? I called the police liaison, Elizabeth, as I raced to the school. She was just as confused. A few minutes later, she called back with the unbelievable news. A clerical error. The charges had been entered incorrectly. Rebecca had been released on bond that morning. By the time I got to the school, Jake was safe in the office, but the terror was absolute. I picked up Mia, and we didn't go home. I booked a hotel room in another county under my sister's name. As we were loading the car, Quinn called again. "Dakota turned herself in," she said. "She's claiming she never went to the school, that she's being framed." But this time they had her. The school had security cameras. The footage was undeniable. The police executed a search warrant on her devices. They found everything. Detailed plans to kidnap Jake and take him to another state, complete with fake IDs and bus tickets. And worse, a document outlining ways to make Mia disappear so she couldn't interfere. It had moved beyond psychological warfare. She was planning to kidnap my son and murder my daughter. Faced with undeniable evidence of attempted kidnapping, Rebecca finally broke. Her public defender arranged a plea deal, 5 years in prison, followed by 5 years of strict probation with zero contact. The judge also granted our request for the permanent termination of her parental rights, a rare outcome, but one that was chillingly necessary. On the day of her sentencing, I went to the courthouse alone. When the judge allowed her to speak, she turned and looked directly at me, her voice cracking. "I only wanted to be loved," she said, "to be part of a real family. Everything I did was because I loved them too much." The judge was unmoved. "Love doesn't manipulate, Mrs. Anderson. Love doesn't threaten, and it certainly doesn't plan kidnappings." As she was led away, she didn't look back. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. We had 5 years. 5 years of guaranteed safety. 5 years for my children to grow up without looking over their shoulders. That night, we had a simple celebration dinner. Pizza and ice cream. It felt momentous. We decided not to move. This was our city, our home, and we wouldn't let her take anything more from us. Life slowly found its new normal. Mia excelled on her dance team. Jake made new friends. The nightmares became less frequent. The locks were only checked once before bed. On the anniversary of Mary's death, we went to her grave. We told her all about our year. As we were leaving, Mia linked her arm through mine. "Dad," she said, "that night you found her journal, I was so scared, but I was also relieved. Because for the first time in forever, I felt like someone was finally going to believe me." I squeezed her arm, my own eyes burning. "I will always believe you, Mia. Both of you." "I know," she said, a small, sure smile on her face. "That's how I know we're going to be okay." And in that moment, walking away from my wife's grave with my two incredible, resilient children, I knew she was right. We were scarred, yes, but we were healing. In trying to tear us apart, Rebecca had only managed to bind us closer together.